Kate, can you take the roll?
Stacy Gloss.
Present.
Dustin Allred.
Present.
Morgan Johnston. Beth Mashewski. Todd Rusk. Andrew Stump. Stephen Wald.
Steve is downstairs.
Okay.
Great. Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Hey, Susan.
Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
I'm just gonna let Steve get situated,
I
and
just
then we will start working our way.
I wanted to say you were correct. Our quorum is 4. A majority of the quorum, being 3, is needed for the purpose of discussing public business.
Even to discuss?
Oh.
Just to
take action?
discuss.
Oh.
To discuss.
Huh.
Interesting.
So now we have 3. So we now have a majority of the quorum, so we can move forward with this meeting, but we will not be taking any action on any items this evening. Are there any changes to the agenda for this evening?
No, for me.
Great. So Scott sent out the minutes from the meeting that took place on June 6th. Are there any changes to? Yeah, are there any changes to the minutes from the last meeting? Do I have a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting?
Okay. I wasn't there. Sure, I'll move to approve. Move to approve these minutes.
I was not there either.
Yeah.
Can the chair second?
No.
No.
Go ahead, second.
I second.
All right, the minutes from the June 6th meeting are approved.
Great.
Do we have any members from the public that would like to provide any input to this meeting? I don't know if Marcus had anything that you wanted to
No,
bring
but
up
thank
at
you
all?
for asking.
Okay. Great, so we will move on to the staff report. Scott.
Good evening. Some updates on the climate action plan. First, under Goal 2 Action 2, focusing on reducing single occupancy vehicle mode share. Engineering staff is currently working with the Champaign County Regional Planning Commission on a pedestrian master plan. They're also doing some spot-by-spot repairs of the brick sidewalks and other sidewalks in the city. They're not doing whole blocks at a time, but rather zeroing in on the worst segments and repairing those this summer. Staff from the Environmental Division have made comments for engineering on the preliminary scope of that work, and I think that RPC continues to develop that project. Marcus, you may know a little bit more about that. Is there anything
About
else
which
to
one?
say? The pedestrian master plan.
Kevin Garcia is the lead on that out of our office, but I know they finished up their public meetings and they're compiling the comments that they received. They were actually pretty well attended. I think the one here had probably 20 people at it, including the mayor came. So people marked out their routes of travel and complained about bad things and gave kudos for good things, and I think they're starting to incorporate those. I will say they're also doing a cycling and walking survey. BPAC is leading that, but all of those comments I assume will get forwarded to Public Works.
Okay.
Just on that too, there was a Champaign County health survey that's going around
Yes.
right now, and that is also asking some questions about walking and walkability. So I don't
Right.
know if the health survey will share any of that information with the pedestrian master plan?
I don't know the answer to that. I know that some folks from CD are going to be participating in that effort with the health department in some respect.
I can
Maybe
ask
Kevin.
about that.
I think maybe
Yeah.
Kevin as well.
Okay, great.
On Goal 3 Action 4, regarding on-site renewable energy, a little update on the solar UC program. We're up to over 300 contacts. Those are people who have either shown up to a power hour or signed up to show up to a power hour, at least on our website. We have 84 summary proposals out. Summary proposal is a desktop review of someone's house or business, their solar viability. And we have 28 full proposals. That's an on-site assessment. We have some verbal commitments that haven't converted to contracts yet, 3. And then we have 10 signed contracts totaling 77 kilowatts of installed capacity and 2 installations complete. So the rest of those installations will just be completed throughout the rest of the year. So that project's going well. We're hopeful that we'll still break the 100 or maybe 150 kilowatt hour level before it's all over. On Goal 3 Action 5, proposed strategies to increase renewable energy purchasing in the commercial sector. Same news as last month. Both houses in the Illinois General Assembly have approved a PACE bill, Property Assessed Clean Energy. There seems to be a lot of bills on the governor's desk awaiting action. So I don't know if the budget impasse being broken means that those will be addressed now, but that's where this bill is. Some additional energy and climate activities. Mayor Marlin has signed on to a Climate Mayor's Pledge. There's a little bit of information in your packet about it and some links to where they've posted the text. They are also developing a Climate Mayor's website. The shell of it is up, but it doesn't have a lot of content at this point. And so the focus of the Climate Mayors is for mayors to pledge to have their city abide by the spirit of the Paris Climate Agreement. The U.S.'s role in that agreement was a 20 to 28% reduction in greenhouse gases from a 2005 level by 2025. Our pre-existing goals were a 25% reduction, right in line, from a 2007 baseline, very close, by 2020, also very close. So it's it's not apples to apples, but it's essentially very similar. Some updates on our water plan. We had some goals to incentivize or promote practices that reduce potable water use for commercial, residential, or irrigation, and or irrigation purposes. So we had our annual truck sale for rain barrels and compost bins, and we sold more rain barrels than last year. I sort of expected that we would level out at some point or keep declining. There's only so many rain barrels that people can buy. But we had a good year, and every year I threaten not to run it again the next year and maybe give it a couple years break. But with sales back up, maybe we should run it again next year. So obviously I have the RFP developed. So we also sold a number of compost bins, not as many as we had in the past. Those seem to have plateaued or bottomed out quicker than the rain barrels. Oh, and there's a note here. Typically, Urbana residents buy somewhere around half or more than half of the total sales at this event. So always a strong showing from Urbana residents for rain barrels and compost bins. I've got another note checked off in green. Continuous is green as is completed on my tracking. Under promote and demonstrate and promote environmentally friendly landscaping techniques, we worked with the Champaign County Sustainability Network to host a green infrastructure and pollinator plant installations tour. So we went to the city bioswale, which is on Broadway, not Broadway,
In front of the Save-A-Lot.
in front of the Save-A-Lot.
Mhm.
And we also visited a pollinator garden downtown that's across the street from the Urbana Free Library that was installed by an after-school youth program that the library runs. And also a single-family residence that had rain barrels and a number of other things. So that one is, that one's marked as continuous. We'll keep looking for promotion and demonstration opportunities. With U-Cycle, recycling coordinator Courtney Kwong is working with stakeholders to set up a one-day household hazardous waste collection event at some point in the future. They're very expensive. The state used to provide funding for one-day collections. They do a couple a year at different places around the state, always changing locations. And so we get that funding every few years. The state would spend around $100,000 each one-day event in disposal costs alone. So it doesn't count staff time or other incidentals. So it's very challenging for us to try and take this on ourselves. Courtney's working with other municipalities and stakeholders. And that's the same group that is also more or less simultaneously working to develop a plan. Well, the plan is actually created, but implement a plan to establish a permanent household hazardous waste collection facility. There's a note here on the one-day collection. The sanitary district has expressed interest in supporting that. So that's really great. They would be a great partner to have. Obviously, they have an interest in hazardous waste not going down the drain. Our next meeting would be August 1st at 7 p.m. in council chambers.
Thank you for that update. Scott, are there any questions?
Scott, do you happen to know on the sidewalk repairs? This is kind of a trivia question, but I remember that the city had some kind of a no net loss policy with both brick streets and brick sidewalks. Are they still doing that? Do you happen to know?
Well, the street that goes in front of Crystal Lake Park, the north-south street, was a brick road, and those came out.
Yeah.
It was apparently extremely costly to refurbish that.
I'm sure it would have.
I think that's certainly the spirit. There's, as far as I know, there are no brick sidewalk replacements planned with concrete. And so when I mentioned that they're repairing these, they're lifting the bricks, leveling it out, putting them back down.
Okay.
But I think that is certainly the spirit, if not,
The policy.
the policy.
Okay. I've noticed a few brick sidewalks come out and replaced with concrete, and so
In what?
I don't,
East and West?
bear a big torch for that cause necessarily, but I was so curious about it because I remember there was I don't know whether it's historic preservation or what the factors are.
I can't say that I've ever seen a written document to that effect, but I've heard the same thing you're describing.
Okay.
Is that driven by resident complaint, or is there a kind of inventory that exists about of the conditions of sidewalks throughout the city?
I think an inventory was done a year ago. We hired the RPC, I believe.
For brick sidewalks and streets?
Well, I think just sidewalk inventory.
conditions.
And I think maybe that's informing the master plan.
And
And so they would have identified, places where the surface is not level or
okay.
unacceptable or unsafe.
Okay.
And I think that's been driving where we're selecting sites.
Do you know how those are prioritized then within that list?
No, Brad Bennett, who's assistant city engineer, is overseeing that project. He oversees all the sort of linear infrastructure, excepting the streets. So storm sewer and sidewalks. But we can ask that question.
And I don't know if this is a follow-up or the same question, but I'm always intrigued by knowing what the criteria are for infrastructure repair or placement For example, does every block at least going to have sidewalk on one side of the street? Or does it need to have X number of walking trips to warrant even a sidewalk on one side of the street? And at one point, do you end up saying, this is a heavily enough trafficked area that we're going to have sidewalks on both sides of the streets? Because I know there are places in Charleston where I live where there are not usable sidewalks on either side of the street, and they're residential areas. And I have kind of the same question for my own street department. How do you pick where repairs are done? Because I've also seen what look like perfectly good sidewalks get replaced when there are places where there are no sidewalks.
Yeah, that's what I was curious if it's a squeaky wheel thing, or
Right.
if this is something that is based on what Marcus is kind of describing. Is there an analysis that shows, okay, well, these are heavily trafficked sidewalks, and we want to make sure there's at least one side of the street that's functioning or safe, that kind of thing. So it'd be interesting to know.
Certainly, any new developments have
Right.
subdivision ordinance requirements
Right.
for sidewalks. Existing, I don't know if the evaluation of the infrastructure included like a pedestrian count. If I know that we did a recent sidewalk project on North Cunningham. I don't know that there was a pedestrian count there. Maybe there was. It may have been a more of a casual observation that people were walking along the street and that there was no sidewalk, and having access to cost sharing from DOT certainly helped further that project. But we can make I can make an inquiry on how that is worked out.
What's the time frame for the pedestrian master plan?
I don't have that in front of me. Can
But
you get that?
it's ongoing right now.
Correct.
Okay.
I think they're evaluating feedback is what it sounds like.
So they've done kind of the existing conditions phase of that, and they're getting community input.
Right.
Okay. And I have just a couple of questions.
Mm-hmm.
First, about household hazardous waste collection. Since it sounds like an event could happen at some point in the future, if a household has, unused gasoline, for example, in their garage, and they don't know where to take it, where should household members be taking that kind of stuff, or who can they contact to find out?
A neighbor with a lawnmower for that particular one. So, for any question of where do I recycle it, there is a city web page called Where Do I Recycle It?
Mm-hmm.
And we have kind of a laundry list of everything you could think of. I don't think that there is any location in our region to dispose of household hazardous wastes. There are several hazardous waste licensed haulers who can safely, legally remove hazardous waste from commercial facilities and transport it to hazardous waste disposal facilities or recycling facilities. Typically, they do not want to work with residences. And recently we've checked on that with Safety Clean, which is located in Urbana. And in the past, it seemed that they had kind of said that they would charge their minimum volume price no matter how much you had. But now it seems that they're saying that they're not interested in servicing residences.
Okay.
So,
Thank you. I will take that answer with a grain of salt,
Yeah.
and I won't chastise my neighbor too much.
yeah, that's why we all have cans and jars of this and that in our garages.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We've had, I think, one household hazardous waste collection since I've been here, so that's 5 years.
So there,
That was state funded.
yeah, there probably is quite a bit of buildup in people's garages and in their homes. So, in anything that I can do, or that the commission can do to sort of support a household hazardous waste collection day. I would be glad to be part of that in some way, and if it's something where the commission members have time and availability, and if they're needed for volunteers or something like that, then I know that I would be willing to assist in any way, and I can definitely put that out there to others in the community to look for volunteers if there's any way to make that happen.
Yeah, when it comes to the one day, there are volunteers and then there are hired staff by the vendor.
Okay.
The hired staff touches the materials.
They touch the material.
Right. The volunteers direct traffic and
Okay.
collect surveys and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So we need both. In terms of a $100,000 event that is, let's say, countywide, the other thing we need is Urbana's cost share on that at some point. Whether this working group will develop other funding sources or additional funding sources, I don't know. But that's the barriers, that it is the cost.
When I worked at the Ecology Action Center, they had it countywide for McLean County, and Bloomington paid a chunk, Normal paid a chunk, and then the EAC did donation collection to cover probably 10, 15, 20% of it, and it was like $100,000. So would the university participate as well for the stuff? I mean, it's complicated because they're a state entity and they probably have some disposal requirements because...
Well, in terms of their own hazardous waste, it would not be household hazardous waste, it would be commercial hazardous waste,
Okay.
and they would be required to dispose of it through a licensed hauler,
Right.
Which exists.
Right.
So they're already set up for that, for their own business
Mhm.
operations. Now, in terms of their staff and students,
Right.
what they generate at home would be household hazardous waste.
Mhm. Okay.
And that's the gap that we don't have filled.
I also just kind of wonder if the public would be willing to incur, like if the people who are participating by bringing household waste, if there were 1,000 cars that came through and you were charged $10 and maybe that's paid online in advance and you have to print your ticket in order to come through, it could be a $10,000 generation. I know that only gets you a tenth of the way to 100,000, but maybe there could be a little bit of cost share on the responsibility on part of the homeowners making the effort as well. I don't know if that works. I don't know if that would ever work with like electronics recycling or other things. Maybe no one would show up if we were charging a fee. But I've lived in places where they do have household hazardous waste recycling at like a landfill center, for example. And you do have to pay a charge when you bring your load of stuff, and they evaluate what you have. So those costs do get incurred anyway by the public separately from taxes that you pay and everything else.
The permanent household hazardous waste facility plan
Mhm.
does suggest a nominal gate fee,
Mhm.
$1 or a couple dollars, or
Mhm.
it may have actually been a donation. I don't remember
Mhm.
the details. And I think, as you said, there are models for that out there. If you charge, if it's free and 500 vehicles come through and you charge some amount, then 400.
Yeah.
Which maybe that's okay, right? If the other 100 are keeping their stuff in the garage, maybe that's the best you can do because you need that additional funding stream. It could create a problem where people don't understand that what used to be free, electronic recycling, household hazardous waste now has a gate fee. It could be problematic if people turn around at the gate and then throw their stuff out the window. I don't know if that would be, if that happens or if that would happen. But certainly we're going to turn some people off if there's a fee.
Mhm.
But that's an okay model.
Maybe that's okay, and I can't imagine, I don't know, many families, if they had the means to provide, some sort of fee, if the hazard is you have flammable materials in your garage, if you've got chemicals that are sort of mixing in air, you've got an indoor air quality issue, so you could be sort of potentially impacting the health of your family. $10 is a cheap way to sort of protect your family from harm down the road.
And in our community, people are used to paying for garbage, so it's not like that's subsumed in taxes that they don't otherwise see. They pay $20 a month or more for garbage.
Right. So if there's no other comments on that, I've got one more comment. This was on rain barrel feedback. I had heard, actually I think we experienced this, that there ended up being a foreign transaction fee on credit cards for the rain barrels, and the question was, is there a company that we can obtain rain barrels from in the U.S. or a U.S.-based company where participants won't incur a foreign transaction fee? And I guess if you're going to incur a foreign transaction fee, could it have been posted on the payment site?
I think certainly we can
Okay.
post that. That will happen. Yeah,
Right.
that hadn't occurred to me. In terms of prohibiting out-of-country vendors, I'm not sure that our procurement rules would allow that.
Okay. I don't think I have a problem with the out of country. Just we were surprised when
Is it charging
When
excess
we were
of what you
trying
thought the
to-
sticker price was?
well, it was a separate transaction
With a credit card.
fee
Mhm.
with a credit card, and so we would have paid it anyway if we had known, as I'm sure many other customers would have. Just were like, oh, what is that? Where did
Yeah.
that come from on the bill later
No,
on?
certainly that should be posted.
Okay. Next year.
Just like if you pay on PayPal, you don't learn afterwards that there's a fee, right?
Right.
You know that.
Yeah. And next year.
Yeah.
All right, any other question about Scott's report? All right, great. Well, thank you so much for that update. Really appreciate it. We don't have anything on the agenda for continuing business from last month. We do have some items for new business. The first would be a discussion about landfill solar. I know that some others in the commission were interested in that discussion at the last meeting. Are there any updates with that? And I guess we'll take your presentation.
Yeah, I think someone had asked about, or several people had asked about community solar, but I'm broadening this a little bit. Community solar is part of a lot of other Future Energy Jobs Act solar opportunities that are now developing. So I'll go through this. The status quo before the Future Energy Jobs Act was that you could install a solar array behind the meter. So, on the roof, on the ground, but plugged into, quote unquote, the backside of your meter. It would power your building and, slow your meter down, stop your meter, make your meter spin backwards. But you could not put out a solar array and just plug it into the grid and expect someone to pay you. You could get paid at the avoided cost rate from Ameren per the existing statutes, but that is a very small amount and you cannot finance a solar array with that. Also, there was no meter aggregation supported by Ameren, also known as virtual net metering. So you could not put a solar array on the edge of town and have the production of 10 panels be netted with your consumption at your house, netted on the same bill. Even if you paid for those 10 panels out there in some way, Ameren was not going to net those on your bill for you. There was a state REC subsidy, so the state would buy 5 years worth of renewable energy credits from your solar array. They'd take the credit, the renewable attributes, and that's how they would count up their renewable portfolio standard compliance. And then you would get money for that. So that's a way of subsidizing solar arrays. So that's the status quo before the Future Energy Jobs Act in a nutshell. Stacey, you look like you had a question. No? Okay.
Okay.
So you did say, behind the meter, you could slow the meter, you could stop the meter, you could spin it backwards. When you spun it backwards, You would accrue credit at the avoided cost rate? Is that what you're saying?
You would accrue credit at a kilowatt hour for kilowatt hour basis,
Mm-hmm.
and it would be like rollover minutes. Sometimes you use more than you use your backlog, and sometimes you push forward extra minutes,
Mm-hmm.
but they true you up at the end of 12 months. If you produce more than you use, you lose it. You donated those kilowatt hours
Oh.
to Ameren.
Okay.
So you couldn't go on overproducing year after year after year and expect anything for it. You don't get anything.
Okay. You can't go into a black on an annual basis. Okay,
Right.
I got it.
Right. The status quo after the Future Energy Jobs Act is dramatically different. This slide may have some inaccuracies or omissions. It is, I think, a 600-page bill or act, but it captures, I think, most of what's going on. All of these, or at least most of these, are, again, they are REC purchases. The state is buying the renewable energy credits. They're adding those up for their renewable portfolio standard, and you get money for it to improve your project feasibility. Lots of interesting opportunities, lots of little carve-outs for different approaches. The other thing that's new with all these different types of REC procurements is that the investor-owned utilities will be required to provide meter aggregation for whichever one of these projects, like say community solar, would require meter aggregation. So community solar has to have it, or it's not extant. So that's new. One thing that's uncertain is if the state goes through all these projects for a year and they buy up all the RECs that they have to per the statute, and let's say that there is still demand on the market for market rate solar array for that would be meter aggregated, would Ameren also have to provide meter aggregation services for that above and beyond market rate solar project? Maybe that's a moot point. Maybe there will not be such a thing for a few years. I don't know the answer to that, though. Switching to our own landfill, some thoughts about where we might go with this. It's a 60-acre, 2-parcel landfill. 10 to 40 acres of it is developable. Probably 20 is the sweet spot. The other 20 has a lot of trees. It's sliced up with roads. It has slopes. So maybe that's too much development costs at this point in time to develop for solar. But probably 20 of it is developable. Also, there are 2 substations within a mile and a half. Developers like under a mile, but a mile and a half is doable. It's just a little bit more on the cost side. The time frame to consider this, there are some procurements, initial forward procurements that are going on right now. I don't know a lot about them, but there is a large draft Illinois Power Authority plan being created right now by IPA, which will later this year propose pricing for block procurements and competitive procurements. The block procurements are fixed rate REC purchase prices, or you could say subsidies, fixed rate subsidies for solar developments. That big laundry list of solar developments. Some of those are block, meaning, I'll explain competitive. The competitive REC procurements are an auction. The state's trying to get the highest or the lowest price. They're trying to buy RECs for the lowest price, and solar developers are bidding and trying to bid the highest price, and so that's how the price is set. Some of the programs, some of the incentives are block pricing, and I think they are declining blocks. So, the first block, I don't know whether it's for a year or maybe less than that, but the first block I think is going to be the highest priced RECs, and then the declines over time. They pay you less for your RECs over some number of years. I suppose the idea is to induce everybody to get really excited and engaged in the market early on, and drive lots of competition early on. And then the others will be competitive rec procurements. The final plan, the final procurement plan for the IPA will be approved by the Illinois Commerce Commission in early 2018. So we'll have a draft plan later this year and then a final plan. The draft plan in terms of procurement, in terms of competitive procurement, doesn't mean a lot unless you're really technical with this. So for us, it's like we still don't know the prices. You have a plan to how you're going to run the auction. If I'm not participating in the auction, it's all still a mystery to me what I'm going to get out of the recs. The block prices, though, are they are specific. Now, they may change after public comment. They may change after the Illinois Commerce Commission has their hearings. But it does give solar developers a pretty good idea of numbers they can pencil in a pro forma. Any questions on that? Zeroing in on just one of these large-scale solar array incentivized projects, community solar. Community solar is where you have a large solar array somewhere edge of town, and a manager of the project sells off their production of 10 panels, 20 panels to lots of different off-takers who are somewhere else. They're not behind the meter, they're not on site, they're not adjacent. They're on the other side of town, they have a shady roof, they can't put solar on their own roof, so they subscribe to community solar at a per kilowatt hour rate for some number of years. I presume there's an opt-out penalty so you could get out of it, like a cell phone contract, but all those details remain to be seen. So those are going to be done as 15-year REC contracts. Up to heretofore, the state's REC subsidies have been 5-year contracts. So if you go put a solar array on your roof today, sell the next 5 years of RECs to the state. After that's over, you've paid for your solar array. You might keep the next 25 years of RECs, and now it's your renewable energy project, and the state has to go and subsidize and perhaps induce another project to meet their renewable portfolio standard. But these are going to be 15-year contracts. The payments are going to be front-loaded so that they're really paying down the development cost, I guess, is the idea. They're going to be part of the block pricing, and they will be limited to 2 megawatts per project. So there's also some language in the statute. The state doesn't want a couple of large sites to suck up all the capacity for all these different incentive programs. They want it to be spread and shared throughout the state.
Can I ask a question?
Mm-hmm.
Since you had just mentioned that off-takers, so people, residents, is it businesses, or do we not know who would the off-takers be for such a project?
It seems to me that there are not any limitations.
Okay.
That they could be residential, commercial, municipal.
Would there be any requirements about those participants having like Ameren as their service provider? If there's some aggregation to that, since they'll have to do the aggregation.
So in a community solar array, you're essentially subscribing to an alternative retail electric supplier.
Okay.
So you're buying your kilowatt hours from this solar array on the edge of town.
Okay.
Ameren is still delivering them to your house and billing you.
Okay.
Just like what we have now
Mm-hmm.
with municipal electric aggregation. We, the city, competitively bid an alternative retail electric supplier for all the residents. You can opt out, but we've done it for you. We got you a good price.
Mm-hmm.
You're paying some energy generator somewhere else on the grid for supply. Ameren is delivering. You pay Ameren for delivery, maintain the wires, and Ameren gives you a bill.
Okay, so this would not be an aggregation program where, like, if the solar panels are on your roof, Ameren reduces your overall bill proportional to the number of kilowatts that were generated by your panels.
That would be kind of like a solar lease, or a power purchase agreement for a solar array on your own roof. There aren't very many of those because on a 5 or 10 kilowatt scale, there's not enough margin for a third-party investor, a third-party owner to come in and still make money.
Okay, I was confused about that. And then who gets the RECs?
With community solar meter aggregated projects that get subsidized by the state will be subsidizing by purchasing 15 years worth of RECs from the entire project. Presumably subscribers will not get a choice. Maybe the developer will say, well, if you want to pay me the REC price for the next 15 years that I would have gotten from Ameren, I'll give you the RECs. Maybe that's a whole accounting thing that they would have to figure out behind the scenes. But I don't know exactly how
I'm curious about
the
that
state's going to do the
mechanism.
payments.
Okay.
There certainly would be clarity if the state was just looking at one 2 megawatt project, calculated up, that's this many RECs, here's the check. If they have to start, pulling out 25 kW at a time, it's just cost.
Is the state using those recs to comply with its RPS
I
goals?
believe so.
Okay. And so in that sense, it is just electricity produced in the state? Like how? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a way of accounting for it.
Sure.
Otherwise, the state isn't going to every little town pulling building permits to count up how many solar arrays there are.
Mm-hmm.
In actuality, right?
Mhm.
This is kind of like an accounting method.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions on this? In terms of scale, let's say we really were able to get 40 acres developed on our landfill. That's about 10 megawatts of capacity. That's about 10 megawatts is about almost 14 million kilowatt hours per year. The city uses a little over 6 million kilowatt hours a year for both facilities and street lighting. Alternatively, that 10 megawatts could power about 1,200 homes, round numbers. So that gives you a sense of scale. What does it really mean if we cover a whole landfill with solar panels? I would be very happy if we were to, supply all of our own power with our landfill. It's not entirely clear. I don't think it's explicit in the act whether municipalities can be off-takers. I think there was a limitation in community solar that no single off-taker could account for over 40% of the project. So they're interested. The authors of the act are interested in getting lots of people an opportunity to buy in. So there's that limitation.
Two comments here. So the UIUC solar farm is about 20 acres and it's about 5 megawatts. So that comports.
Is that about right?
Yeah, but you did say 2 megawatt limit on a project.
2 megawatt limit on community solar. Some of these other programs also have megawatt limitations. There is no explicit prohibition that I've seen or heard that says that you couldn't put a 2 megawatt community solar on a landfill next to a 2 megawatt brownfield solar next to another,
projects. Yeah, sure.
excepting to say that there is a general statement that says the state should try to spread these projects around.
Okay.
That may be why that may mean that it is important to be ready for the first procurement with your site. Because if others are not ready and there's capacity for incentives and no one else is taking it, maybe you get 2 projects. Relative to our climate action plan, 6 megawatts of solar is roughly the electricity it produces is roughly equivalent to 1% reduction from our 2007 baseline. we're looking for a 25% reduction. Our recs have made some reduction, I don't have the numbers in my head. And then just general energy efficiency has made some improvements since 2007. But something to keep in mind, if almost all of our residences are on municipal electric aggregation, as they are, and we do 6 megawatts of community solar, and it's all off-taken by our residents who are otherwise on municipal electric aggregation, which buys renewable energy credits. Accounting-wise, we've just changed one rec for another. So we won't make any gains in our greenhouse gas accounting. Now, if, that 40% limit, if the city and 2 other commercial facilities, buy up a whole solar development, they're all commercial facilities, they're not on municipal electric aggregation, presumably they're not using or buying any other green power, well then that would be all gain in terms of accounting. In terms of accounting, how would that happen? If it's off-site, it would show up as kilowatt hours consumed when Ameren downloads all of their annual data to us, and we'd have to do kind of an after-the-fact calculation. So, potential procedure. I'm considering I changed this slide last night because I got some feedback from Anthony Starr, who's the director, perhaps is his title, of the Illinois Power Authority. He's a very helpful person. I'm considering now releasing a request for information when the draft plan, IPA plan, is proposed. So the draft plan, in terms of the block pricing, will give solar developers numbers to pencil in. At that point, I could release a request for information, which could do 2 things. One, it could get me some responses that say, yeah, we think you're viable for this, but not that. We think your plan to put 3 2-megawatt arrays next to each other is never going to fly. They're not going to subsidize that. It may help us learn something. It may also put our sites on the radar of solar developers. So there may be some value in doing that. Then come early 2018, when the final plan is produced, we may want to release an RFP right when the plan is approved, because at that point, certainly the block prices will be set. Then again, we may want to wait until just before or just after the first procurements, competitive procurements, where developers and rack aggregators, which are kind of middlemen, actually bid on and set the competitive prices. At that point, both the competitive and the block would be known. I think these are going to be developer driven. I think the developers are going to identify the sites and go to the state. Well, with the competitive recs, once they're purchased from the state and they're out on the market, they're tradable. So either a middleman or a large solar developer, those are the 2 people buying the recs, are going to go looking for projects to assign those recs to. The block prices, I don't know exactly how that's going to relate. Like, does the state go out and look for projects? Is there an application process? I don't know. But there's some timing issues there. My plan is to keep learning how this is going to work and read other people's RFPs, other states. They're not going to be perfect match here because we have a completely novel market. And then be ready at these benchmarks to release a request for information and or a request for proposal. It'll probably happen that one day I'll learn that I'm a week late or a month late, whatever that benchmark is already happened. What I want to have at least on hand is a 75% done RFI or RFP, so I can just finish it up and put it out. So that's everything I know about solar right now.
Okay. Other than you were asked to look at the landfill, everything you just discussed is equally viable on any developable parcel, any wasted spot, brownfield space. Okay.
Landfills are great because there's no other competing land uses bidding up the lease price.
Okay.
I should mention, I don't know if I talked about this last meeting or if this happened since then. There was an engineering firm in Chicago that held 2-day workshop and meet and greet between property owners and particularly brownfield owners and solar developers. So I met 24 solar developers. They all, at this point in time, think that even on a landfill, they're going to be paying a per acre lease. So if we develop 2 acres of solar on our closed landfill, we have a liability that someone else mows the lawn, they pay us a lease rate, and that property becomes taxable because it's now primarily a business use. So now we get 3 benefit flows, and we haven't even talked about the environmental benefits yet. So then, residents, if it's a community solar, can buy in and get solar. We get the greenhouse gas benefits. It's a really good deal.
Could I expect most of these projects to happen on city-owned properties? Is that?
I think the developers are just looking for a cheap lease rate.
But I mean, again, you haven't kind of run the numbers, but broadly, if you were to make shaded parking on the top deck of the city parking garage downtown,
Probably too small.
yeah, and it wouldn't be anywhere near 6 acres, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean,
And obviously the structures would be some added cost from a standard stand that you would need to hold up the panel on the landfill.
let's say that's a 25 kW project. That could take advantage of the distributed solar incentives. So it'd be a rec subsidy, and that would be a small scale installer would go to a rec aggregator, say I got a project, and they make that swap. So yeah, we could do that. The problem with that is there's more lattice, so it's just more cost.
Yep.
It's not a problem, it's just cost.
I'm sure that there's more cost in doing that.
Yeah.
But potentially some benefits. It's shaded parking, and it's out of sight from the street level, but it's visible. It could be more visible as a demonstration.
So there's a timing problem with that project, and that brings up a timing problem with all of our street lights in all of our buildings. Our buildings are on a competitively bid, fixed price electric supply agreement until June 2019.
Okay.
So we can't, if we put a bunch of solar on these projects, we may be violating a contract in terms of we have to take so much power as we have an agreement. We have to dig deeper into that. The other problem with the streetlights is until
Could the electrons be sold to downtown businesses though as a community project? No. Okay. It was on the same building,
you'd have to have someone manage a community solar project to do that. And on a small scale, you can't do it.
Okay.
We may have, I'd have to reread our supply contract. Obviously, if we, the contract is for them to sell us power. If we went to zero, certainly we'd be violating the contract. What if we cut our electricity, our buildings in half? I don't know. I'd have to look into that.
Okay. Your point is though, on a city building, it's behind the city's meter. It's not
Correct.
like it's on a vacant lot on the edge of town.
Correct.
Okay.
And actually, that's a more obvious case. If, say, we put a community solar array and the city wants to buy into it, well, that would be just switching alternative retail electric suppliers, which we have a term contract. We can't do that. Streetlights are a little bit different. We do not have a competitively bid supply contract. We're on an Ameren streetlight. It's an Ameren light tariff, outdoor lighting tariff. Right now, we have a year or two, I don't remember the final date, but we have a year or two left of a franchise discount on that street lighting. So we're paying about half of the actual rate. That expires in a year or two. After that expires, Ameren is no longer negotiating those types of contracts. Their franchise, us giving them the privilege of using our right-of-ways, they're just paying a lump sum for it from now on, which is good. So until such time that contract expires, again, I don't remember the date, nothing can compete with that rate. So we can't really power those with on-site solar, community off-site solar, until that expires.
So are you saying because we're on a supply contract with Ameren, that if we put on solar, that's essentially switching the supplier and we're not allowed to switch?
No, we can switch our supply for streetlights from Ameren to another, but you can't beat 3 cents.
Okay. Other than the fact that it's an impression to the populace that we are running off of renewable.
I
Our
don't
own
have
renewable.
I don't have funding for
Okay.
renewable
Well,
energy.
What was the thing, and maybe it wasn't the streetlights, but maybe it was the buildings where you were saying that would be switching over to another renewable energy supplier? Was that for the
Alternative
building?
retail electric supplier.
Okay, what's,
Mhm.
and where was that not allowed? Is that for
Well, we have a
building?
contract, and it has 2 years left. June 2019 is the final date. We have a contract with an alternative retail electric supplier, so that's a power plant somewhere on the grid,
Mhm.
to buy electricity from them.
Okay.
So we can't switch because we have a term contract.
And is that we have to buy X amount, so we'll pay it even if we don't use it?
That's what I'm not. That's what I'm uncertain of.
Okay.
Because certainly when we bid out our demand, we tell the suppliers what we use,
Right.
but you don't use the exact same every year.
Right.
And so you can't guarantee when you use the exact this.
Yeah.
So I'd have to look into and maybe talk to the supplier.
Because like you said, if you shut down a building that you weren't planning on shutting down, or you had some crazy great conservation or efficiency program where you had cut your consumption by 15%, it's not switching, it's reducing your need for, but they could say, well, your minimum is X, so you're going to pay us for that, regardless of whether you used it or not.
Exactly.
Okay.
And my recollection is that there isn't any, say, percent or total number take or pay clause. But that may be because the industry has never had to deal with this. No one's ever used less electricity before.
Mm.
So, that may mean if a building burns down and we use less electricity, they are sympathetic. But if we find a roundabout way to move all of our supply somewhere else,
Mhm.
they may not be sympathetic.
How do you think that will guide future contracts and stuff if we're trying to juggle maybe generating our own solar and moving ourselves to being a provider and wanting to be able to provide residents and merchants with low cost via aggregation? Would it be like a clause, but you'd end up paying more per kilowatt hour for the flexibility of being able to leave?
It's probably going to change everything.
Okay.
When our supply contract ends, we may not even be in that market anymore, that brokered find me the cheapest kilowatt hours price market anymore. We may just put all of our demand onto Ameren Supply, even though it probably won't be the cheapest kilowatt hour, and instead maintain the flexibility to find on-site or off-site
Right.
solar projects. We'll see. By that time, we'll probably see maybe the first round of all these state incentive programs at least start. They may not be finished by then. So we'll have a better idea. Rules are being written. That's what the IPA plan is about, so we don't know all the details.
This may be a stupid question, but how does it work that you would use electricity that's generated by solar panels to power streetlights, which are running at night, when solar isn't adding to the capacity on the grid?
Yeah.
I mean, I get it that the solar is just adding to capacity that's offsetting,
That's exactly
something
right.
that's being produced by coal or natural gas during daylight hours, but then,
That's exactly right. The grid is like a bank.
right.
You put in $20, you don't get the exact same $20 bill out, you get a different $20 bill. So you may own the production of 100 kilowatt hours that gets produced over there. Those individual kilowatt hours, you're not off taking them at your house. It's all just charging the grid. It's all pressurizing the grid, and kilowatt electrons go path of least resistance. So there could be scenarios where there is a community, let's say an individual house, that is 5 miles from a coal-fired power plant. In the future, and with these rules, there may be a house that's 5 miles from a coal-fired power plant that buys into a community, subscribes to a community solar array that's 100 miles away. Well, clearly, their local grid is being charged by the coal-fired power plant, but that's not the power that they're paying for. They're paying for that community solar.
The time of use thing, those could.
Yeah,
because
but
electrons are
that's
instantaneous.
I mean, I hear about these projects in other states, like California, for example, where they're also considering these time of use questions, and they're adding in storage capacity to these projects. Is that something that's a piece of this, or is it all just at this point shuffling things around on the spreadsheet and saying that we're adding this capacity, but we're really taking it from here, and it's more of an accounting kind of thing?
It's more than accounting, because this is displacing what supply that would otherwise be provided by other generation forms. So if it wasn't for these projects, these solar projects that get built, then this supply would be provided by coal, gas, nuclear, wind, mostly coal, mostly nuclear.
Yeah, which makes sense for like commercial uses and things that are big users during daylight hours. But again, I think it comes back to more of like an accounting kind of thing. Street lights and residential users, which are using, peak demand is when the sun is not shining typically.
Because a renewable energy electron acts the same identically as a coal electron once it's on the grid, the renewable market is conceptual. Otherwise, you can't get paid for the extra value of it.
Right.
So that's why it's kind of an accounting thing. In terms of batteries, I don't recall any battery language in the Future Energy Jobs Act. There was, I can't remember, some entity that asked, it might have been a power company, that asked our regional grid operator to produce a tariff for the value of battery storage on the grid. So what that means is someone would like to put utility scale batteries on the grid, and the value that provides in backup power, in smoothing out the demand curves, they want to get paid for that, and they want MISA to start figuring out how to do that. So that's coming. In terms of individual facilities, that sort of battery size, say the price to operate to back up a fire station with a battery is about $70,000. That's what the solar array costs too. So there's a question of how to find $70,000 worth of value. Just with a fixed price, solar panels and battery backup, battery can't outcompete a diesel generator, or can't be cost neutral with a diesel generator. What I don't know, and what I hope to get some National Renewable Energy Lab assistance from at some point in the near future, is whether a solar panels, battery backup, and time of use price might actually pay for the battery, because then we can buy electrons when they're cheap and use the battery to push them back off the grid when they're expensive. Because with net metering at your building on a time of use, you actually don't get kilowatt hour for kilowatt hour, you get penny for penny. So that's a possibility.
That's what I was going to say to answer your question, is that there ought to be some price arbitrage about those electrons you're using at night, where there's a surplus of energy and they're cheap. It's probably why you're paying 3 cents a kilowatt hour, maybe, on that streetlight contract. I don't know.
Could be.
But yes, those solar electrons that are available in the middle of a hot summer afternoon, should go 4 times as far to do your streetlights at night. But you'd do that through price if you could sell the electrons, real-time pricing. That's how that would be.
Right.
Recoup that benefit. But I have no idea about the environmental side of that, but that's just the price side of it.
NREL wants Urbana to finish up the Soul Smart designation before they give us any more technical assistance, which is fair. So I don't have that analysis at this point. The other barrier is at the time that I was getting some assistance from NREL, we didn't have hour by hour consumption at the fire station. So we've done this analysis, just not with the time of use pricing. Because that fire station is a DS2 delivery service, it's not a large scale delivery service. Their meter doesn't keep track hour by hour, and you can't really do the analysis on time of use pricing without that.
The thing with the street lights, was that connected directly somehow with solar production? Was there one of the projects that you were talking about?
I don't think so.
Okay, because the solar and street lights, you could say that the solar is powering everything except for nighttime stuff. And wind turbines are what are producing the energy for
It would
street
be
lights.
accurate. So if we bought 6 million kilowatt hours worth of solar, it would be accurate to say we're a 100% renewably powered facility. Now, some people may scratch their head and go, how can you be solar powered when you have streetlights on at night? That's because we're using the grid like a bank.
Mhm.
We're producing all of these solar electricity during the day. We're putting it on the grid, and we're coming back later and we're pulling it off.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I get that. I'm just thinking like larger scale. Like, is this reducing? How are they reducing capacity of electricity that's being generated by fossil fuels on a state or a regional scale? If they're not thinking about the storage issue, because you're still going to have this demand that has to be met by this traditional production
Basically.
at night, right?
Well, so
It's some fraction of that daytime use, though. I
Right.
don't have the numbers. I used to know California numbers pretty well, and it may be flatter in Illinois. I don't know in terms of the 24-hour clock, but I mean it fell by half at night in California.
yeah, and there's wind and there's nuclear.
Mhm.
The two things are not coal, basically, and there's gas.
Right.
So all those can run at night.
Right.
And solar providing matching peak demand well is probably competing with those other peaker plants. We're already, in terms of how do we displace the energy generation that is less desirable. Wind is already crushing coal. Coal plants have been closing all over the place in the last few years. And frankly, nuclear was a difficult prospect in a few places in Illinois until they got some additional payments for their carbon-free production in the Future Energy Jobs Act. So that's what it looks like, is this slow attrition of older plants that would have to have expensive upgrades, expensive repairs. They say, you know what, we're going to close this and put our money somewhere else.
In Illinois, isn't nuclear roughly half of what we produce?
Say again?
Doesn't nuclear produce about half of our
I don't remember the
electricity?
numbers. It's a lot.
Okay.
Coal and nuclear are both big.
And even just from street lighting, if you can go from, metal halide and other high intensity lights to LED, you can
That's the
reduce
other-
your consumption by 85% right there.
That's the other timing issue. Is I'm also working on the Guaranteed Energy Savings Project, which is going to reduce what our demand is anyway. So
I feel like this has been incredibly informative and really interesting. And thank you for doing all of this research into this. It sounds like we've had some pretty incredible opportunities with the right planning and sort of forethought. You could be an early adopter in the state of Illinois and maybe get in before there's legislation to get rid of the Jobs Act. I would like, just in terms of like the low income stuff, I think that the low income stuff is going to be a little more challenging in the state. And if there was a way to think about low income solar community set up a meeting potentially with CCRPC, since they provide low-income services to the low-income community. It may be interesting to have a conversation with them and to see what they come up with. I don't know. I get the sense that the landfill opportunity to have an incentive for the landfill to have opportunity for landfill development might be an easier one.
Yeah, I don't know what that's going to look like.
I don't know what that looks like.
In terms of what the state wants. I don't know that they want a different tier of pricing per kilowatt hour for all low-income qualified. I mean, I don't know what that looks
Yeah,
like.
I wonder if this all comes through with the filings of the IPA or with the IPA.
You know,
I don't know.
It occurs to me probably what it looks like is they pay a higher rec price to drive the price down for low income. But then there's a question of, well, do I have to do 2 megawatts at low income, or can I find...
Right, I mean, there's all these questions.
Yeah.
I mean, I think in low income, some programs would start thinking about low income resident roof structure. Like, that seems, I don't know, I've got some different feelings about that and how to work that out. But that seems like a discussion for another meeting. All right.
Scott, would
Yes.
the landfill solar fall into the brownfield? I mean, is it considered a brownfield?
Yeah.
It is,
Yeah.
even though it's closed and capped and everything.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that list I had,
Yeah.
our site would probably be viable for 3/4 of those programs. So, one thought is we don't pick one, we just put out an RFP that says, I've got a site, I know that all of these are probably possible, make me a proposal, I'm interested in maximizing the space.
Mm.
And that's what your RFI would give you a better sense of.
I hope so, yeah.
There's nothing they have to do at a landfill or could need to do at a landfill that precludes putting panels over it.
No, this is done all over the country. There will be a maintenance agreement, mow the lawn, don't puncture the cap.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Great, thanks. Should we move on to the next item? Climate Mayor's Pledge. So, Scott, you had actually brought up in your report, staff report, that it's available. I didn't have anything when I requested that it be put on the agenda. I didn't really have anything more specifically than to say that we should make this sort of language, what was signed, publicly available. And I feel like that's been done. Is there any discussion or comment about Climate Mayor's Pledge that we'd like to address?
I think the city did a good job publicizing and elevating its leadership in this. It was very timely when the national news about the Paris Accord came out. So I thought that was a great publicity moment for our commission's work and for the new mayor and stuff. It was good.
The one piece of the substantive work that the Climate Mayors Group is doing is they've put out, with LA's leadership, they've put out an RFI to automakers, and they did this in consortium with a couple of cities, and they basically added up all of the fleet cars they own and say, we're interested in buying this many fleet cars electric. I've asked for, I haven't seen any response or outcome from that. There was a comment, there was a call today, there was a comment that they're now looking to regionalize some potential either RFIs or group RFPs for fleet electric cars. But I think that's a really useful way to drive the automakers, make them feel a little more secure that there's a market.
Next item, commission outreach activities. I think as a group, we have had a few meetings where we've talked about getting additional people to be involved, how to get people to come to these meetings, how to get some public input in the advisory commission meetings. This area is just open for us to discuss any ways that the commission members might be able to do some outreach and see what we want to do kind of together to get that out, rather than putting that on the staff to be the face and to be the outreach for the entire commission. I think a good example is the Bike Commission Survey Monkey that just came out, and I thought that was kind of a neat thing to circulate around to the community and to participate in, that could generate some interest in attendance, if not receive some feedback on why people attend, why people don't attend, and that kind of thing, and that kind of facts.
That's interesting. Did you
An
take the
idea.
survey?
I did take the survey. Did you?
Yes, and I did not think it was well crafted. I was a little, I thought it was, I'm not sure it was well crafted. So it basically said, here are 6 reasons why you might not be going to these meetings. What's your reason? And it didn't, there was no box to check that basically said, how do I become aware of an agenda item that's relevant to me, And so they basically say, like, I don't go because it's not important to me, or the choice is like precluded, I think, like an otherwise earnest and interested citizen, just having the commission's work be knowing its relevance to them and knowing when, a particular item was up. So, to me, the marketing challenge for public participation in our work is that it overlaps with citizens' goals. Like, does attending the meeting help you meet your goals as an individual? And so, depending on the agenda and what we're doing, we're going to find better or less overlap. Sometimes there's a gap where we may be doing something that we think is potentially, 200 people would come that day if they knew we were doing it. And then there's a gap. And sometimes it may be that this is super wonky stuff that happens in the background, and it ends up being a citizen choice on their opt-in or opt-out on their power bill, but it just happens. And it's not necessarily a huge tragedy that it's not known, or not. But, gosh, people are so busy. Like the cost of coming out when, you're trying to get to your kid's sporting event or just keep up with your own work or cook dinner for your family. It is really costly to come and attend something like this. So I think it's really good to consider what we're working on and to make it as relevant as possible to people, and then to try to get that word out. But I thought that the BPAC thing turned it around and was basically made it seem like, I don't know, somehow scolding. Yeah. And
there is something to be said for survey design and creating or crafting your survey so that you actually receive the information that you're hoping to receive back, and that you're asking the questions that you definitely want answered. You may think that you're asking one question, but everybody answers that question totally differently, and it's hard to know.
Yeah,
so the survey design, I think,
like
is really important.
I agree.
Yeah.
So an example of some public engagement that the city has done that has been successful is the solar power hours. Fabulously successful in getting people out 2 years in a row. So, that's one example. Why does that work? What's different about that?
I know it's relevant.
Well, one of the things that I think about it is there's something for people to do. There's a possibility for a person to do something that they already want to do. Right? They're already kind of interested in buying solar panels, buying a solar array, and we're giving them a good opportunity to do that. There's a thing to do. Whereas if someone were to just walk in tonight just because it's on the schedule and they're interested in sustainability generally, we didn't give them anything to do. One reason, potentially. And like you said, Steve, sometimes that's okay. Like there is business to be done that is not interesting.
Mhm. I mean, it's public. There's a public good in it being exposed. And the city, we have that in place where it's taped, it's made available conveniently to people to catch up with on their own time. And if something people become aware of after the fact, they can access the proceedings that way. But yeah, I think that's a good example then of that we found our way to an activity that meets our climate action goals well and has real salience and relevance to individuals. And yes, the form of those power hours, they've got a cool name, they're in different locations. I don't know, are you feeding people or not? Is there?
Generally, no. I mean,
Okay.
sometimes the hosts do, but
Mm-hmm.
the project isn't.
Yeah.
I think it depends on the goal of what you're trying to accomplish by having people come to the meeting too.
Mhm.
Like solar power, I haven't been to one of these
Thing you
meetings.
want them to do.
Yeah, so there's a certain aspect of that that's educational, right? So they're coming and they're being given information about something that they're interested in. Whereas I would imagine in a lot of these meetings, you're looking more for input from the community about a particular issue, and it's not necessarily that you are trying to educate them about something, but you're trying to gauge their opinion about something and use that information and incorporate that into some decision-making structure. So they kind of could have the educational, goal part of this meeting at some points too. It just depends, what it is that you're trying to accomplish by having people. And I think that's probably would help if it's clear and people have notice about it ahead of time that, this meeting is happening, and you can come and get information about XYZ. That would potentially draw some people, whereas other meetings, you can say, this meeting is happening because we're considering doing this and we want to know what people think about it, then that would draw different people. So I think having that clarity would help, determine what the approach is to sort of get that input, but also to figure out, who exactly you are or you would like to come to the meeting on a particular session.
So I think I haven't been on your website recently, but I'm on the Facebook page, which has good posts on it. Would it be help? Because I think landfill solar or climate mayor's pledge might be of interest to some folks over, say, the kind of standard things that get talked about. And I'm wondering if just a post about here are the items that are going to be at next week's meeting, because this is kind of fed to you on your homepage or whatever. If you're a friend, it pops up as opposed to having to go to the sustainability office's website and look at and download the agenda to see what was happening.
Sure.
And it doesn't have to be like one of my posts where it's a half page long, but it's simply, hey, cool items that are going to be talked about at the meeting.
Yeah.
We're going to be talking about community solar and
That's a great
solar maybe out at the landfill and the climate mayor's pledge.
So it's an alternative way and a way to get the agenda out there into the public.
Yeah, and then a link to either the document or to the website.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think, again, it's also important how you frame it, too. So if you just say, we're going to be talking about solar at the landfill at this meeting, okay, great. Or, the city is considering the city, is looking at ways that they can do community solar, and they're thinking about the landfill and, this one and this one. Come out and give us your opinion about which one you think is something like that. So there's a stake, right? You have to create the sense of, you make it clear to people what their stake is in this topic or this subject, as opposed to just saying we're going to talk about this.
Sure. We've had from time to time, particularly when we have comprehensive plans that we're drafting, we've had open houses, and so it's very explicit. Come and give us feedback. Here's a thing for you to look at. It's in draft form. It's not all done yet. And so a small number of folks come up. And I think that gets back to there's something for them to do. it's not all decided yet.
Right.
You know, a stake.
Yeah.
As you
I think
said.
people have to understand what they're. I mean, I've been to plenty of development-related meetings in the city where the room is packed because it's clear what people's stake is in this business that's happening at this meeting, right?
I mean,
Someone's
I'm
going to
sure
put
if
an
you-
apartment building next to your house if you don't come and say something about it, right?
Exactly.
So people need to understand what the stake is, you know, if they don't come and provide some input about whether or not the city pursues putting solar out at the landfill or, you know,
Exactly.
doing something else, right? So making it a little more, not, you know, creating drama where there's not drama, but making it clear, like,
You want to
know.
propose a sustainability tax, huh?
Ooh.
There you go.
We'll just put that on every agenda,
Yeah.
and there will always be people here.
No, I mean, yeah, I mean, it doesn't have to be so, you know, something that takes what would otherwise just be kind of, you know, it's less clear what their stake
Sure.
is and what how it would be important for them to come and say something about what's being discussed.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's interesting. In that sense, you know, it is, we have, we're an advisory council, so an advisory commission, so, you know, the city council would make the final decision. You'd expect the turnout at the NIMBY meeting to be biggest there, where there's actually a decision and a vote being made, and it's probably always a challenge. I don't know if there's some way we could structure our decision-making or our work in a format where there's like a use it or lose it moment, like come to this meeting and this is where it's going to be decided. Otherwise, the temperature is always kind of on a low simmer. You know, it's not necessarily make or break to come and give your comment.
I mean, certainly people who really want to craft, shape, direct the final outcome probably have a sense that if they show up earlier in the process, they'll be
Yes.
able to redirect.
That's right.
Folks who don't care if it's light blue or dark blue, they want it to be yellow,
Mm-hmm.
don't need to show up to redirect. They just need to show up at the last meeting and oppose.
Mm-hmm.
So it's different.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's just, yeah, it's not so much a recommendation, it's just a condition about why it's challenging to get people to come. But, you know, and I don't know, I'm glad you're asking the question. I think it's something we should always revisit. And as far as what commission members can do, you know, I just wonder about going to existing, potentially overlapping, you know, Venn diagram, but clusters of people who do turn up regularly and are energized and active about issues, and just having bilateral meetings where you seek common agenda, you know, what are shared goals. And then if it, you know, so whether it's a church that's just overflowing with active groups, and we do some probing about what are your issues, and then we get creative about finding overlaps with what their issues are. You know, where we're not showing up and say, care about this, but we just find out what they're all showing up for about, and then being like, oh, it's neighborhood safety, or it's this, or it's that, and then we find shared agenda. That's long-term kind of constituency building, but that kind of approach can help build an audience over time. You know, even if you end up after doing that 15 times, you've got 10 regulars now because you found those people. But that kind of thing can happen actually one-on-one, I think, like where a commission member could be like, fine, I'm going to visit 2 churches and 3 nonprofits and have those conversations.
Yeah. So I wonder if it's so like we're doing with at the farmers market,
Mm-hmm.
helping to table with the solar program. Some of the commission members have been asked to volunteer on Saturday mornings to talk about UC Solar,
Mm-hmm.
and I haven't volunteered, but I know that others have.
Mm-hmm.
And I assume that it's a great way to sort of meet some of the community members and talk about UC Solar, and also to talk about how the commission is supporting that and supporting this program. I would, in future meetings, and when we have a more full quorum, talk about things like these, maybe outreach events or these sort of outreach activities
Mm-hmm.
where maybe it is something like at least once a month, one commission member does something, and there's a report back from that at the commission meeting. I think that, that would be on the hook then for basically 2 activities a year outside of the commission, which isn't a very heavy lift.
No, that's good.
But could be to,
Yeah,
exactly.
could be putting the seeds out there and
Right.
the bridge building.
Exactly. I don't know if, I guess one commission member did attend the pollinator and bioswale walk. Was there more than one? See, I don't know. I think that there was one that I heard from.
Yeah,
But
good.
then I think that's
There's
great. So
one.
like that sort of activity to sort of support CCNet and to amplify and to continue to sort of be that voice in the community for sustainability and sustainability efforts can really be of benefit, so that when there is an issue that comes up where people are interested and they feel like they are stakeholders, it may not be as daunting or scary, or I don't actually get the sense in Urbana that anyone's like daunted or afraid of talking to the city commission. But they may already feel, I know these people, I know this commission, then I'd be happy to show up and give my input a little bit more. So I appreciate your comments, Scott. I appreciate your comments. And I think the insights as an instructor, professor at the university are really valid. Asking the questions how to get your students engaged and involved. And
Yes, I've produced some attendees, so I'll continue to produce attendees.
You've probably got about half of our foot traffic.
Yeah.
all right, so I think that this is a good discussion. Don't want to belabor it too much in every meeting, but that's good to have it. Any announcements?
One.
Okay, go ahead.
There is a Smart Energy Workshop. This is hosted, organized by Faith in Place. It is Wednesday, July 26th at 10 a.m. at the Champaign Library. They're going to be talking about home energy conservation, the new smart grids that are smart meters that Ameren is installing per state statute, and what that means for you and how you can pair those smart meters with new technology in your house that will work with them, take advantage of their capabilities.
Is Ameren doing it, or who's doing it?
Ameren is not running the workshop. Ameren is installing all the smart meters across the state. They're almost done now.
Okay. You have an announcement?
2.
Okay.
Take your BPAC survey. But also they announced that they're rescheduled the Boneyard Creek cleanup day for August 5th, the one that got rained out back in May, I think. Meet at Matthews Avenue, but let Beth Ranke know if you want to play.
Okay. And this is my last meeting on the commission, so I'm resigning from the commission after this meeting. I've been part of it since it started. Scott, how many years ago was it?
9.
Kate? 9. Yeah. And I would just say, there's been 9 years is a long time, but I think the city has come a long way. It's very gratifying to me personally to live in a city that has a climate action plan in place, takes it seriously, month after month makes progress on it. Scott, I can't say enough about you personally and what you have done for this commission's work. I think you're an excellent, excellent public employee.
Thank you.
And the plan which we crafted, with all of its elements and all of its numbers, the fact that we hear from progress each month across all of that, and that it's moving forward in some way, and that it has. I mean, we really have cumulative progress, which is terrific, and it puts us in a position to be able to, write the kind of press releases we want to. When the president withdraws from the Paris Accord, we could say, we're among, the leaders who are continuing to make progress on this. And I think that creates a real benefit to all the citizens of Urbana and creates affinity to local government, which is appropriate and should be there and everything. I'm really proud of what the commission has done and what the city has done. And I'm leaving town for a year, but I'm coming back. So I'll always be interested at some level in what this commission does, and if there's a vacancy, I may come back when I'm back.
We'll just keep a seat warm for you.
Yeah, exactly. But I wish you all well in the year ahead, and welcome to the commission. I'm very excited you're here, Dustin, and I'm excited you're leading it. So I wish you guys well in the year ahead. I'll learn what I can in Spain. I'll bring it back. They have a lot of solar in Spain.
So Steve, thank you so much for your years of service to the commission. For me particularly, your policy analysis has been very helpful. You're always willing to bounce ideas back and evaluate everything that we're working on. It's been very helpful. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And thank you, Kate, for my papers every month. I hesitate to think of the stack if I had them all. I can't say that I do. I recycle them duly, but I do use them well in the meeting. So, thanks.
Thank you.
I'd like to echo the thanks for your service on the commission. It's been a pleasure serving with you, having you on the commission for the last 4 or 5 months or 6 months that I've been a member of the commission. So all right, we're starting a new chapter, and that's a good thing. And best of luck in Spain.
Yeah,
it
thank
should
you.
be absolutely
Thank
incredible.
you. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It's a real opportunity. So I'll bring lots of ideas back to Urbana.
Great. Any other announcements? I think that really covers it. Okay. Thanks everybody for attending. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll move to adjourn.
Second.
All right. Thank you. Motion carries. Meeting adjourned.